Good morning, everyone. I'm Leslie Combemale. I write for the Alliance of Women Film Journalists and for the Credits, which is the Motion Picture Association. I created this panel 8 years ago, so this is our 8th annual Women Rocking Hollywood. So welcome to I am wearing this and this to celebrate Barbie because a woman is at the head of the box office, both in front of and behind the screen, right? So we have Greta Gerwig, and we have a bunch of female filmmakers and below-the-line talent at #1 at the box office. It's just very exciting. So I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists, and I'm starting with Rosemary Rodriguez. She won awards for indie films Silver Skies and Acts of Worship while directing TV shows Peacemaker, The Walking Dead, Jessica Jones, Dickinson, The Good Wife, and many more. So I really I suggest that you guys go onto IMDb and look all of these women up, because we're not talking about some of the projects that they wrote on, and almost every female filmmaker is a writer-director. So definitely get yourself onto various places online and find out more about them when we're done with this panel. So she produced and directed Home Before Dark and Rise. Most recently, she directed the series finale of Your Honor and the new gender-bending horror movie Hail Mary, which stars Jack Huston and Angela Serafian. Okay. Jen McGowan blew the doors off any gatekeeping with her sleeper hit indie Rust Creek in 2018. Hopefully some of you guys have seen that. And then she went on to direct widely in episodic, including The Purge, The Twilight Zone, Titans, and Star Trek Discovery. She was the founder of Glass Elevator, an international skill-sharing and network resource for professional women in film and TV. She is a vocal advocate for parity and equality in Hollywood and our culture at large. Sam Bailey began her career in her hometown Chicago with 2 web series inspired by her own experience, You're So Talented and Brown Girls. The latter was nominated for a Primetime Emmy. On the small screen, she's worked on a variety of projects, including The Chi, Grownish, Mixed-ish, and Dear White People, on which she also produced and wrote. She is one of 2 directors helming the upcoming Marvel series IronHeart, and if you don't know about that, you need to learn about that, because it's a big deal. Okay, and then Laura Merians Gonçalves, I hope I pronounced your last name right, yeah, is the first cinematographer featured on Women Rocking Hollywood, a role filled by female filmmakers working in the industry way too rarely. She has a long history of lensing high-profile commercials and music videos, including several for Bjork and Black is King by Beyonce. She won the first jury prize for Best Cinematography, won by a woman at the San Sebastian Film Festival for the Darren Aronofsky-produced indie Pacified, and this year acted as DP on 4 of 6 episodes of Dead Ringers starring Rachel Weisz. She was named one of the ReFrame Rise Project's class of 2022 to 2024, meant to accelerate high-level, consistent advancement for mid-career talent. And then Andria Wilson Mirza is the director of ReFrame, an initiative founded by a partnership between Women in Film LA and the Sundance Institute, working to create systemic change in Hollywood through programs, mentorships, and the ReFrame stamp, which is awarded to projects that have demonstrated gender-balanced hiring. Previously, she was executive director of Inside Out in Toronto, Canada, one of the world's largest LGBTQ film festivals. So before we speak, and Rosemary's starting, we're going to play you a little something from her new movie.
You must be Gabrielle.
You know me.
I was warned about you. You don't have to die. I'm only here for the girl.
So am I.
Truth be told, I don't want this to end. I don't want to go back. I've loved being human.
It's because you're a child. You haven't felt their pain yet.
The pain is the best part.
Okay, so by way of explanation about that, Hail Mary is an interesting genre mashup. It's the story of Mary, with Mary as an immigrant from South America. Jack Houston plays Baal, this demon bent on killing Mary before she gives birth. It was released at South by Southwest, currently has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and is seeking distribution. So what attracted you to the subject, and how did you work on the sci-fi, how did your work on the sci-fi and horror shows help you in directing this film?
Nice. Yeah, I love telling stories about sort of the good and the bad, but like looking for the gray areas. So when you have characters that are really, you know, like there's an angel and a devil in there. And so when you have a character that's supposed to be all good and all bad, the fun part of a directing is just finding those sort of areas where you can take the devil and make him seem like not so bad. And you can take the angel and you can kind of make her seem like, ooh, she's a little like not the way you would expect. So that's sort of always looking, whether it's like The Good Wife or Peacemaker or whatever, it's always looking for the gray areas and sort of telling those stories that make people think, because I think that's where the questions are and that's where the humanity lies, right?
And actually, we were talking about The Walking Dead and how that is one of the things that really attracted you to
Yes.
working on that show.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about what you learned from working on that show?
Yeah, we had dinner last night, and I love talking about The Walking Dead because I'm like a super geek fan of that show, and so I love that show. And so when I did The Good Wife, I met Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and then Jeffrey, like, you know, texted me one day, but I didn't know it was him. I got a text, and I was like, can I tell that story?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm at home, and I walk in my front door, and I get this text, and it's like, hey, we want to come do The Walking Dead. Want to come direct The Walking Dead? And I'm like, and my husband was like in the kitchen, and I'm like, Nestor, somebody just asked me if you want to do The Walking Dead. I'm like, but I don't know who it is, right? Because I just have this thing. I'm like, oh my God.
Leap it out.
And he goes, Nestor, my husband said, yeah, tell them, fuck yeah. And who is this? Excuse me, who is this? And I was like, okay. And then I was like, who is this? Like, Jeffrey. I'm like, oh my God, of course. So then I get on the phone, and then we talk. And anyway, he was excited to do this character of Negan because he's a superb actor, as you all know, and he really wanted to dive into like a really dark, like hideous part, you know. And so it doesn't really get much darker than Negan. But what was interesting was the first episode I had to do, like, you know, I talked to Scott Gimple, and he's like, you know, I've been waiting for this episode for years. This is my favorite comic. And I'm like, where Carl goes in and like infiltrates Negan's place and then face to face and exposes his eye. And I was like, oh my God, that's Scott Gimple's favorite one. I'm like screwed. Like I can never live up to like, how am I going to do this? Anyway, it was just this thing of like, you know, Negan is like so dark, and have him face to face with Carl was such a fun scene to direct because he had to expose his eye and humiliate him, but he also had compassion for him because his mother, he had to kill his mother, and you could see, I had a scene where there was a real opportunity to show Negan almost like a father figure, even though he had done these hideous murders of like, you know, Glenn and Abraham that we love so much. So it's really fun to get in with an actor because they also love to do complicated things and like, again, bring the humanity to however dark it can be. So that's what makes it really fun. And I think that's what makes, you know, The Walking Dead such a great show is it's such a human show, and we can all see ourselves in those situations, and it's great.
And when the new film gets distribution, why do you think people should see it? What is compelling in particular? You can talk about the fact that it was filmed in Mexico with an amazing crew.
Oh yeah, I mean, filming that movie was incredible. anytime anyone gets to go to or shoot in Mexico, it is just heaven. The people are the best people on the planet. And so it was a really rugged, crazy shoot. But what's important about the movie, what I think it's really well cast. Beth Holmes cast the movie, and she did a great job. And I think what was important was to have this fantasy story about, it seems on the surface like it's a religious story about Mary. It's about Maria, this immigrant girl who comes up. She's 9 months pregnant. She never had sex. She's coming up through Mexico, and she needs to get to the United States because there's a virus, and it's going to kill every newborn, except in the United States. The rest of the world, so if she has the baby in Mexico or where she comes from Belize, it's going to die. So she meets Jose, who's a carpenter, and Joseph, right? And she meets him, has to convince him to take her through the cartel's tunnel that he built to get into the United States, where they meet Angela, who's the Archangel Gabriella, and puts her, has a weed farm and puts her in a barn so she can give birth before the devil catches her. So it's like a really wacky, fun movie. It has nothing to do with religion, but has everything to do with how we treat immigration in this country. And so what I love, again, what is important about what we love, the fantasy and sci-fi and the gory violence, what we love is that there's humanity underneath. So it's the same with Hail Mary. It's basically about, a brown-skinned girl trying to get across the border who's pregnant, and how she can't. And
Yeah, it's great.
It moves me because that's the whole impetus for making the movie, is like the injustice in the world. But you don't know that. You take the ride of this crazy movie, and it doesn't hit you until the end, where you're like, holy shit, this is real. So that's what I love, and that's what I wanted to accomplish with the movie, and I think we did. So I hope it gets distribution and it comes out and you get to see it.
Well, yeah. Jen, hopefully a few folks in the audience have seen Rust Creek. How has your career shifted since then, and what are some of the things you've learned in episodic?
Yeah, so Rust Creek is really the thing that, thank you, is the thing that broke me into television, which I have been having so much fun doing. As you said, I got to do The Purge, Twilight Zone, Titans, and my favorite of all time, Star Trek Discovery. And I'm really glad that I got to work on these big brands right away, rather than having to kind of claw my way up through television. And although it took me many, many years to get the opportunity to do any television at all, I think because of those years, that's why I got to enter at the level that I got to enter at. And I mean, as you know, my favorite is Star Trek Discovery. It's my heart. It's what I love about it is what the show is about. All the people behind the show are about that too. Like it's totally authentic through and through, and it's a really magical place to get to work.
And it has a really good, balanced cast and crew.
And
I
the
love
reason for that is because that is authentically who all these people are. They believe in the things that are in the show, and they act that way too. And it's just a phenomenal experience. Sometimes when things happen in our industry, that are shitty or inappropriate or bad, you go, God, that would never happen on a set like that. Because everyone is so intentional about every little thing. And yes, everybody makes mistakes. And you can't control every single person when you're talking about a crew of hundreds. However, every moment of the day, that vibe and those intentions are absolutely felt. And that's why it shows up in the show the way it does.
It does. And we have an announcement that nobody knows yet, but Jen is directing on the new
Final season
of the show.
Yeah,
So-
and I so wish I could talk to you guys about it. It's gonna be so awesome. There's some stuff that I can't even like, and it's so hard. And I'm really excited for everybody to check it out. It's gonna be, it's really, it's just special. The whole thing is special.
But going backwards, something that you can talk about is tell them if some of you have watched that series. Yes? Okay, so which episodes you worked on, and just pick one of the two and talk about one of the experiences.
Yeah,
working
so,
on one of the episodes.
well, I'll talk on kind of the crazy production side of it, actually, because I think that's stuff that people don't frequently hear about. So I did 2 episodes in season 4, and I actually did half of each episode. And the reason I did half of each episode, because that was at the height of COVID before we had any vaccines. So it was like show up in Canada, hole down in an airport hotel for a week where they slipped food under the door, and you were like a leper. And then go to another hotel where you had to sit there for weeks, and then finally you were allowed to start doing your job over Zoom. And then what happened was, I mean, the production teams are so incredible. At one point, they had 5 episodes shooting at the same time, and they were and Sonequa, who is the star, who's the fucking amazingest human on the planet, just an amazing, oh yeah, you've worked with her too. Yeah, she's just, and that's what I mean about everybody, like from the showrunner, the producing, the director, the star, they set the tone, and it trickles, and everybody, gets in line. But so, and she's in everything. I mean, the hours, people don't understand, and I hope they do with what's going on with the strikes right now. Actors in television work so hard, especially if they're the number ones on the call sheet. That means it literally means they're at the top of the call sheet. And, so they were juggling all these different shoots. I think 2 of our ADs had heart attacks. It was a disaster. And I ended up being in Canada for something like 3 months because everything kept changing so much. And you really had to adapt. I mean, you had to every day be ready to shoot something that you weren't ready to shoot. It was just what was happening at the time. And then what happened was we were trying to finish my first episode. It bumped up against a conflict that I had to leave. They had to bring another director to finish my episode, and then at the end of the season, that happened with another director, so they called me back in to finish that director's episode. So it was bananas, and it was only able to be accomplished because everyone was operating at the top of their game, everyone, in every department. And coming back for season 5 was really wonderful because we didn't have quite as many pressures as operating, during the pandemic and again, pre-vaccine, where everybody was scared, quite frankly.
But we had talked about, right after you'd worked and been able to announce that you had been on those episodes, and you were already really effusive and saying it was this incredible experience. So the fact that you felt that way, even with all of what was going on, is really a beautiful testament to the show.
To the show. It's to the show, it's to the material, it's been baked in from the beginning. It's just very special.
Can you talk about the next thing that you're doing, or no?
Well,
You're wanting to do.
most of us are sitting on our asses right now, desperately wanting to do things, which is kind of what I'm doing. I mean, I'm pitching on movies right now. I have, it looks like maybe 2, who knows what's gonna happen. I mean, to be quite honest, nobody knows until the strikes are over.
And we all are very supportive.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It's like, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this more, but these issues that the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild AFTRA are fighting for right now are relevant way beyond this business. It's about working class people being able to sustain a working class life while doing work that they are skilled at and that people make money off of.
Which they should share in, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam, you're such a great success story. You started out working on web series because basically you didn't see what you wanted to do or be or watch yourself out in the world, and so you created it. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the importance of having that be kind of central to how you go forward in the industry and what that meant to you specifically?
Yes, I can talk about that. I think when I started making web series, I was really looking for, well, two things was happening. One is that you were able to like shoot things digitally and put it online, and you got to go straight to the audience, which was really a great like leveling of the experiences. So for me, making those was just kind of really being able to center myself and my point of view without getting permission from anybody else. So doing that and then realizing that people were like, there was an audience for that really kind of validated and allowed me to move through the industry with just a real sense that like I could make something and know that it will find people, and I didn't need to have like an exec or anyone also trust that I had already done it for myself. And I think that really just made me more confident, because when you move into this industry, it could be a really like scary thing. So like knowing that I can always go back to making something and then putting it out there was really helpful to me. And I think that energy, that like indie spirit is always just in me, no matter if I'm working on like a music video or a short doc or a Marvel show. I think that energy kind of has always stayed the same. Yeah.
And then you also are from Chicago, and
Yeah.
a lot of the projects you worked on,
Yeah, yeah.
Chicagoans representing here, and a lot of the projects you've worked on center that city. In
Yeah.
what ways would you say is that seen both visually and kind of in terms of story, just as a through line for the projects you've been on?
I think it's more of an energy thing, you know, like Chicago has a real like blue collar approach to the arts, and it's really community focused, and a lot of those communities overlap. And I think filmmaking is a great art form where you have to collaborate in a lot, and you have to like depend on your community. And I think, again, like whether I was doing a web series or Marvel, I really had to like use my my community to help us get the show made. And so I think that energy of like, we're kind of all in it together, and there's nothing bigger than the show, and how do we like show up for each other, that is always happening, whether the budget is $2,500 or $100 $1 million.
And part of that kind of community and that sort of spirit of indie that you bring to all of your projects, including IronHeart, is about bringing people with you, each one teach one, and having mentorship be a major part of what you do in your work. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, because it's not like someone came to you and said, oh, you get to have someone shadow you. You made that a priority. Not only that, but you made it a priority to make sure that your crew and your casts are balanced and are representative of what we see in the world. So can you talk a bit about that in terms of being a filmmaker that makes that choice, and what that means and why it's important?
Yeah, I think like on my first web series, I remember us shooting in a park, and these like 3 young black boys were like, what are you doing? What is this? Like, why, like, what's this camera for? And it was the first seed that I realized that I had to be really aware and intentional about making sure people understood that like filmmaking, like anyone can do it if you want to do it. Like, and I think them just seeing that really put a seed in me to make sure that the next thing I did, we would have teaching sets. So I was a teaching artist at the time. I had other collaborators that were also teaching artists, so we would bring some of our youth on. And at the top of the day, we'd be like, okay, who's into fashion? You're gonna hang out with wardrobe. You're interested in lights? Cool, you're gonna hang out with the girls. Like, there was or the gaffers. If photography, you're gonna hang out with the cinematographer. And it was just to kind of like widen their experience and what it takes and what a career in filmmaking can be. That's not just directing or just acting or just writing. There's a lot of other ways that you can have a real beautiful career and craft in this industry. And so I did that from my second web series, and then when I got into TV, well, on my second episode of TV, I had someone who like DM'd me really and was like, I would love to shadow. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna see what I can do. So I just asked the line producer, like, can I have an assistant? And they're like, yeah, you have to pay him. And I was like, cool. And then from then on, I would just bring somebody on at either I was allowed to have someone shadow me, or I'd have to like max them as my assistant on set. And so either way, it's worked out each time I've been on set. So until someone tells me no, I'm probably gonna keep doing that because I think it's really important.
Yeah, that's good. And you are one of the 2 directors helming all the episodes on IronHeart, and we can't really talk about the show, but you guys know about Riri. You know that she's a very important character in terms of the canon, of Marvel superheroes, and she represents something that had never been shown before or seen before. So you kind of needed to have that be reflected below the line in your casting, above and below the line. So can you talk a bit about some of your collaborators, which included your cinematographer, Auntie Chang?
Yeah, Auntie and I met at Film Independent. They have a group called Project Involve, and he had shot maybe one indie film that went to Sundance, and he knew my work. We knew of each other's work, and we're kind of like, we're just gonna work with each other. And we have kind of moved up separately, but at the same time. And so when IronHeart came around, I was like, I would really like to work with him. And he had just shot Pachinko, and it was gorgeous, and that was a no-brainer for them. And I just like to work with the same people. I mean, we kind of like, I'll work with people for like 4 or 5 projects, and then we kind of move out, and then we come again. It just really depends on what the energy is. But for me, it was really important to have people around that I felt really safe with, and going on the journey that you could imagine what a Marvel show is. So it was really helpful to have that. And then just, to me, it's not a unique thing to want to hire women, to want to hire Black women, to want to hire brown people, to want to hire queer people, because that's my community. So just in the way that these white guys like hire a bunch of guys that look like them, I'm gonna hire a bunch of people that look like me. And I do think the onus is always on us to really fight for that, because it's just really difficult to get people to move up, really, and what it takes is a chance, and if they don't get a chance, then they're kind of stuck in that whatever level they're at. So I think I'm pretty proud of like how we got our heads of departments, and just really making sure that we weren't just shooting a show that had a lot of Black and brown people in it, and then behind the scenes, they'd come off set and it just wouldn't look like that. I think representation is important, but I don't think that job stops in front of the screen. I think it's really important that the people who are putting their like blood, sweat, and tears, and are the people you're bumping up against every day and in the crafty line with, also just reflects the world that we live in, especially something like Marvel, which is so universal and so many people see themselves in these characters, that I think that it's important that the crafts people behind the screen also reflect that.
Absolutely. You are next working on your first feature. What did you learn on IronHeart that will serve you going forward? And what elements of your style and mission as a director do you want to make sure are always in evidence in your work in future projects?
I think working on a real practical level, it was just the stamina to get through it all. It was not like, usually when I'm on TV sets or directing episodically, I'm directing for like maybe a month at the like longest between like prep and post, and this was like almost a year of my life. And so just the stamina of doing it, and now I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to have a 23-day shoot schedule like that. Like, please give me that. So yeah, I think just like proving to myself that I can do it and get to the end, for me kind of feels like, I used to say that like making indie stuff, there's nothing harder than that because there's no money. And then I shot during COVID before there was a vaccine, and I was like, well, that's like the hardest thing I've ever done. But once you've been stretched that far, I feel like I proved something to myself that I didn't know that I had. And then, yeah, moving into that, I'm gonna do the same thing I've been doing since I made You're So Talented, which is like working with people I wanna work with, holding myself to a high standard, holding my collaborators to a high standard, and hopefully having a lot of fun while I do it, because that's the point.
And there's been a movement in film and television and streamers where a lot of times things are not announced in terms of who is below the line until the day that the episode is aired. So when you do, and you will, watch IronHeart, then you want to make sure that you look to see who is below the line, look them up, find out what else they're doing. And, you know, it's, as fans, it's really important for us to amplify those people because that's how they get their next gig. And we want to see all the kinds of artists that exist in the world being represented visually and in story in the shows and movies that we watch. So that's, please take that on as a directive from these folks that are up here. So Laura, your personal history is your father photographed many famous musicians in his career, including Muddy Waters and Jimi Hendrix. How did that impact your style and your interest in being a cinematographer?
Yeah, I mean, my father was an extremely inspiring and visual person. He was the type of person that was constantly like analyzing the light in the room or the time of day or pointing things out to me to pay attention to. And also just, you know, painstakingly in attention to detail. And so I think those things, I didn't know what a cinematographer was at the time, but now looking back, obviously that was very formative for me. He also published comic books, which, you know, is, you know, just being a kid and being involved in those inking sessions and meeting with the illustrator and seeing how a story was told with frames like that was obviously like very, very important for me in what I do now as a visual storyteller.
That's really interesting because when we had the conversation, you were saying that you want every frame that you're responsible for visually to tell its own story. And it really makes a lot of sense, having grown up with someone who was doing panel to panel to panel, that's kind of what went in and how you kind of interpreted that as an artist. So your aesthetic as a director of photography is to make sure that every shot has its own story. And it is kind of finding its way to tell the bigger story of the whole narrative. How does that express itself in your work? And if you can use an example, use Dead Ringers, which you only recently aired, and it's really visually beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, what we all hope to accomplish as filmmakers is like have the image forward the story. You know, and that starts very early on in our prep, and I think everything, all the choices that we're making are, you know, in service to the story, and I think that's really important to me. I think, you know, more and more I'm like a minimalist and trying to do that in the, like, as few, you know, as efficiently as possible. One example on Dead Ringers is we had this scene that, where a woman's talking about postpartum depression and how she's fearing motherhood and the pressure of having a baby, and there's a ton of dialogue in the scene between three people, her and her husband and her doctor, who's Dr. Mantle, played by Rachel Weisz. And the director and I are like, how can we just tell the story with like one shot? And we just did this one long zoom in to the belly, you know, the belly, and no more coverage. It was just the one shot, and we felt like that really told the story of just like where this pressure is in this situation. I don't know if that's a good example. There's a lot of examples of it. I think that's just sort of where I'm at now, and the style of the show led to that sort of simplicity.
And in terms of that, because you're talking about collaboration, and since we have directors on the panel, how do you work, how do you see your collaboration when you're working with the director? Or what's that interplay like? Because I think that's, a lot of times fans don't really understand kind of how that collaboration works. From your experience, what would you say?
It's everything to me. You know, it's like the most important relationships outside my family are my relationships with my directors and my crew, and they're my extended chosen family, you know? So how does it work? I don't know. It's magic, no. No, there's synergy, and I think, you
So
know.
it starts from the very beginning of prep, and then you're kind of working through, and it's different with every director, I'm assuming, and
Yeah,
just
exactly.
depending on, you start with prep, and then each day begins, and you kind of,
Yeah, I mean, you want to have, you know, aesthetic similarities. You want to have the same taste. I think style is everything. And you just want to make sure you kind of, you know, perception is so complicated and so subjective, especially in filmmaking. It's the most subjective art form. I mean, you're literally, you know, other than comic books, probably you're like really leading the viewer in what they're paying attention to and what's important, what's not important, and all of those things. So you sort of want to see the project in the same way and make sure you're going to be on the same page. And then obviously being on set, as you guys all know, is a totally different thing. And so
and kind of developing a language specific to you and that particular director to make sure that you guys are always on the same page. And
yeah, it's different, and in TV it's hard because you have a lot of different incoming directors, and they're getting up to speed on the show and the style of the show, and you're sort of like speed dating. But I love it.
you shot many music videos, including Black is King, which many have called Beyonce's magnum opus. What scenes did you work on? And tell us, you said you have some fascinating stories. We'd love to hear one.
Yeah, that was a wild experience because I had shot a music video with Beyonce, and then I thought, you know, she didn't know who I was, you know, because I was just, she had a lot going on that day. And then it was like we wrapped and we all said our goodbyes, and then like that 2 days later I get a text that's like, are you available tomorrow for Beyonce? And I was like, yes. I wasn't available, but I quickly became available. And show up at her airplane basically the next morning at 7. I had no idea what we were doing. And it was a very small, it was myself, my AC, and that's it. And it was Beyonce and her daughter and her security guard. And I didn't know what we were doing, and we flew off, and we basically ended up shooting, and this continued to happen. Like we did that day, and then a couple weeks later, I get another text, and I didn't know we were shooting a movie, and you know, I was one of a few DPs on the project, and we did everything that's supposed to take place in Africa, but wasn't in Africa. So we shot a lot in different areas of California, in Arizona, we would just fly to different places and land and shoot stuff. It was insane, but it was a lot of fun.
Were you operating
she's
too?
awesome. Yeah. I mean, it was just me and an AC and Beyonce.
Yeah. That's something. Your next project is shooting Questlove's new documentary on Sly and the Family Stone. What can you tell us about what you're doing with that?
Yeah, actually, Beyonce recommended me, which is
all right.
crazy. I still didn't know that she knew who I was, like even after all that. But yeah, I met with Questlove. His name's Amir. I met with him a couple years ago about this project. I don't know how many Sly fans are out there,
Oh,
but
God, come on.
they were a
Look
very
them up,
seminal
look them up.
band, and you know, I loved Summer of Soul, and I love Amir and what he stands for and who he is as a person. And right now, I think I'm just really focused on working with good people. I've never done a doc before, but I just want to be around interesting creators and doing things that I'm passionate about. And this subject is awesome. I can't say too much about it because it's still evolving, and it's very
It
much.
circles back to your dad and all of those
Yeah.
famous musicians he was photographing, which is so wonderful.
Yeah, and you know, so much history that I love, and just hearing those stories, and I learn like 100 things every time we shoot about the history of music and the structure of music and how everything influences, just like, yeah, everyone's life. Yeah, it's all connected.
Wonderful, thank you. So Andria, Laura is in the latest class of ReFrame Rise artists. How's that been going? And can you talk a bit about the program?
Yeah, I would love to. Laura is actually one of the first cinematographers in our ReFrame Rise program. So the idea behind ReFrame Rise, which is a collaboration between Sundance Institute and Women in Film, is that for, you know, a lot of women working in certain roles in this industry, you can gain success, you can get in the door, your work speaks for itself, or at least it should, but there continue to be barriers that prevent a certain kind of advancement. You can get to this level, but maybe not to this level. And those goals look different for everyone, right? So with ReFrame Rise, the first cohort was about 2.5 years. It really focused on directors. And now with this group, we're focusing on both directors, many of whom are also writers, and also cinematographers like Laura. And it's such a gift to be able to be, you know, in space with these incredibly talented artists and strategize with each of them about what that next step looks like for them and how we can strategically find a way there. Honestly, it's the kind of support that I wish like everyone in this industry had, because it's really hard. And I think a lot of those conversations are coming to the forefront right now, and people are sharing some of the challenges and experiences that they've had. And so I think that community that Sam spoke about, that Jen spoke about, really is more important than ever. You know, building those networks of support, sharing our stories, and supporting each other. So at the core of it, that's what the work is about, and I feel really grateful to be a part of it.
And every year, ReFrame offers a stamp to projects that show a gender-balanced production. What are some of the films and TV shows that recently got a stamp, and can you go into some of the ways they're rated so that people can get one? Also, she's going to tell you some things that nobody knows yet in the...
Oh yeah, I love how you set up the announcements.
Yeah.
It's like, I love it. So we do this ReFrame stamp, which is a mark of distinction. We do it in collaboration with IMDb Pro, and it gets awarded to feature films, narrative feature films, and scripted TV series that demonstrate a commitment to gender-balanced hiring. So literally, that's exactly what these folks are talking about. So it's not just who's on screen, it's not just that one, you know, director on that particular episode. It's everyone on those crews of sometimes hundreds of people that make up what that environment is on set and what that feels like when you walk into it. So each year we announce the top feature films and the most popular scripted series that earn the stamp. We're getting ready to announce the TV series from the most recent season that earned the stamp, and there's some really interesting numbers there. For the first time, 50% of television episodes have at least one woman credited as a writer. So that's huge. Especially in this moment where we're having so many conversations about how writers are treated and compensated and the opportunities that they get. 40% of episodes, of the 2,000 episodes that we analyzed, were directed by women. 40%. This is huge growth. And some series that are, you know, incredibly beloved, that are doing great numbers, series like The Bear, which many people see as like, yes, I'm obsessed with it, season 2 is my life. You know, people sort of perceive this as like a male-centric show in terms of the on-camera, the number one on the call sheet. But they crewed up and staffed up that show in a way that really was representative of the work that they wanted to do, and that earned the stamp. So it's really, really cool for us to be able to, yes, shine a light on these series that are, you know, putting women front and center, but also reminding folks that, like, as Sam said, like, this is the world that we live in. Like, so it should be reflective in everyone that's on set and everyone that is in that community, and there shouldn't be those barriers to access. And that's a big part of the work that we do, is just trying to remind people of that truth. A diversity of perspective enriches every story, and that can come from everyone on the set, whether they're, you know, in line with you at Crafty, or they're behind the camera, or they're an actor. Everyone is a part of that journey.
And you bring up that you just announced that, which they haven't put out publicly, that half of the, you know, that's 50%, that there's a female writer, and that brings up the issue around the WGA and SAG-AFTRA and the strike, and as we've said, we're very supportive of it, but it has a really strong impact on women, not just the strike, which is, hard on everyone, but becomes difficult in particular for the female filmmakers, but we have to do it, and we have to do it because there's so much at stake for people below the line who is just not the usual thing that you've seen forever. So can you talk a bit about the unions and the strike?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a strike is a last resort, Like everyone up here has said, we want to work. People in this industry love to make shit. That's what we want to do. And the strike is a tool that we have to really show how incredibly serious these issues are. These are people's livelihoods and these are people's lives. And these people create the things that you love out of nothing, out of thin air, and they should be fairly compensated and they should be able to share in the extreme profits of this work. And that's really what this conversation is about.
And what can fans do to support, and also, by the way, you need to, if you don't know enough or don't feel like you know enough about why everyone is striking, you should go online and do some research on it. It's a very important issue. It affects everyone. So you should definitely look it up and be armed with information. If you're fans, you want to know why your films and your TV, why it's so important for unions to be represented correctly and for there to be a diverse cast and crew and for them to be paid for their work. So I would invite you to consider doing that. So what can fans do to support female filmmakers and all folks working in the industry in terms of working towards fairness for all, allowing for diverse voices, and gender-balanced productions?
I mean, fans have power like nothing else in this work. I mean, that is literally the thing that can make the change. In my work at ReFrame, when this project launched, it was called the Systemic Change Project. And what that was meant to reflect is that the system needs to change. And a big part of what that change is where the power lies. Who controls the resources, who has access to those resources to tell the stories that they want to tell. And fans have power. So by using your voices, by supporting talent like this, like these amazing, unique, independent voices that are putting their stories, putting their hearts and lives and minds and energy and blood and sweat and tears into this work, supporting them, by watching the shows, by tuning in. Even during the strike, there's no current ask from the unions to boycott or to not go see your favorite films. These artists need that support. That sends a strong message. So I strongly encourage, talent that you love, see what they're saying about the current, labor strike, see what their positioning is and thinking of ways to amplify. Because we really, if by showing solidarity, we can transform what this industry is into this sort of utopia that some of these folks are describing, where you walk on set and you feel like you are part of a community, where the process of making something can be as beautiful as the experience of watching it. And that's really what we're working for.
And Rosemary, what did you want to add?
I just want to say something real fast, which is I think following us on our social media is key. I think that you guys and ladies do not understand that I'm not working. I'm not going to be on set. I don't know when I'm going to be on set again. We don't know when we're going to create great stuff. But I can tell you day to day in my life, what keeps me going is getting on Instagram, posting things, and then getting responses from people, because knowing that the work that we do, we can sugarcoat it and sound like it's all great, and it's really hard work. And we really deal with a lot of politics day to day to struggle to get made. We struggle with females getting financed, getting access to financing. Our struggle is everyday fighting, but the joy is connecting with you guys, and you guys following us and answering and taking joy. It gets me a moment to step back and just feel the gratitude of what we do and how privileged and special it is to be able to connect with people we don't know over characters and stories that make our lives better. So I just want to thank you. That's all I wanted to say. It means a lot.
Okay, so thank you all very much for being on the panel and for sharing your stories and sharing your experience. You have the guide, so you can see the names of these folks. You can go online, you can find out what they're doing, support their work, but not just their work. Look up if you're interested in seeing a movie or you're interested in watching a show, what's below the line in that? Are there any women? Is there a diverse cast and crew? These are important issues because, everyone's art is interesting, everyone's art makes us all better, and that's what we're saying here, and that's why we're trying to make as much of a difference as we can to the future of film and TV. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much to
Thank
our
you, Leslie.
Thank you, Leslie.